Hi, so a few days ago, Ian Hazzikostas, game director, sat down with Law Community Manager and discussed a number of topics relating to what people want them to talk about, Battle for Azeroth, and specifically what they want to talk about. Mob scaling was the key thing to take from it. In fact, so much so that they even announced ahead of the live Q&A that scaling was going to be a key feature within it. So what I want to do is to explain where my views lie on scaling, where I see the pros and the cons of it, especially as it's implemented in World of Warcraft at the moment, and what Blizzard had to say about it, as well as a follow-up that Ian Hazzikostas posted, for which, of course, there's a link in the description below if you've not caught up with that yet. So first of all, when it comes to mob scaling, I think it's hugely beneficial. When you go to a zone, you enjoy the questing in a particular zone, you don't get to a situation where the mobs and the quests are progressively worth less experience and you feel that you're slowing down your leveling process just so that you can do the quest that you are enjoying. You can have your cake and eat it effectively if you have scaling, because that quest line will always be relevant and always give you the right amount of experience for your level. When you're leveling up and decide to do a dungeon, all the more noticeable. In the old days before scaling, you could go into a dungeon, come out with a load of experience from it when it used to give a load of experience, and suddenly find yourself a level or two behind. And the quest line that was perfectly fine when you were doing it before you left for the dungeon, now again is worth very little experience. And frequently, if you wanted to level anything like efficiently, you would take the opportunity just to get rid of all those quests, go to another zone and start up there. Not very satisfactory if you really want to immerse yourself in the storytelling. So what Blizzard did in Legion was introduce level scaling, first of all just for the current levels, for the leveling experience from 100 to 110, and then later on throughout the world with various brackets. It's the brackets I'm not so keen on. I would have preferred, if I'm going to be honest, for scaling to work everywhere. Maybe have a separate bracket for the latest zones because they're very keen on you doing those storylines. But maybe if you start off as a level 1, you can basically go anywhere and do them in whatever order. Well, they didn't want to do that. And to be fair, an awful lot of the player base didn't as well. I think the way they've done it largely meets with the approval of an awful lot of players. So that's great. However, one downside, of course, is that as you level up, you don't ever feel stronger. Now, there was always a case, and this is what was talked about here. Someone was saying about the fact that, is there any plans to curb back on the PvE world mob scaling? In this particular case, what they're talking about, even at level cap, the mobs scale a little bit with your item level. So what Ian Hazzikostas explained here is, first of all, this has been in for a little while. It did come in, first of all, when they populated the Broken Shore, and it didn't work very well to begin with, so they sort of reined back on it, and then I think they've got it working a lot better now. So just to clarify the situation there, it's only the mob's health which scales with your item level once you reach level cap, and even then not in proportion to your item level. What he explained was the benefit of this is you don't want a situation where someone is going around farming mobs or completing mobs for a quest or world quest, whatever it happens to be, and someone comes along and snipes it by just one-shotting the mob. And that's fair enough. That is annoying. You know what it's like when you rush in towards a mob to complete the world quest. Oh, that's perfect. It's a low health. I just need to get close enough to throw an instant cast range spell on it or something like that, a judgment in my case. And if someone's just going around and basically one-shotting them, you'll never make it. And this is the problem sometimes, I think, with world quests. I was saying last night on a stream that there are some world quests and it all works really well when there's other players about. And there are some world quests where when there's other players about, it just makes it take much longer. It's really annoying. And yes, of course, you could try and group with these people, but that's not the reality of MMOs these days. We tend to want to do things solo. There are some MMOs, modern MMOs, that take account of that fact and will not make you want to hate all of humanity when you see other players in the same questing area as you do. But that's by the by. it is nonetheless a benefit, sure, that the mobs have a bit more health. They don't do more damage, that was emphasised. They don't do more damage to you. So as you get better gear, you will effectively be stronger. You'll be less susceptible to the attacks of these mobs. It's just you have to do a little bit more damage than you would have done at a certain level. But you'll still kill it more quickly because its health is not scaling in proportion to the damage you'll be able to do with higher item level. And particularly when you start getting much better quality gear that's better than its item level might otherwise suggest. For example, raid quality Azeroth pieces and so on. And trinkets, I suppose, eventually when we get some good ones in the game. Now, coming back to the leveling issue, and this is where Ian Hazzikostas might be straying too far into the area where I don't think they need to do much. So when you're leveling, of course, the problem is that you ding up all your stats, because your gear, you're not going to change your gear as soon as you level up, unless you've got heirloom gear, which automatically scales. And you're actually weaker because whatever haste value you had is now a lower percentage haste. Whatever crit you had is a lower percentage crit, and so on. So even though your overall stats will have gone up a little bit, you get the vast majority of your stats from your gear. And proportionally, they've gone down because they haven't gone up. But the amount needed for 1% on secondary stats has increased. And it can have the effect of making you feel weaker with mob scaling. The same mob, now, as soon as you let's say you're in an area and you've got to kill a load of boars. And you kill a boar, and that was nice and easy. You're leveled up now. Now you kill the second boar. It's like, actually, that boar was tougher. That's unfortunately the nature of it. And it is one of those things, especially when you're in really good gear. And of course, you're not going to be replacing that gear with new quest gear as you ding up for a while at any rate. You are going to feel progressively weak as you go up. But the point was made, especially in Hazzikostas in a follow-up, where he explained that this is the way it's always been in a way, even without the level scaling. It's just potentially exacerbated now. And that's because the mobs have got more difficult. Whereas before, when you were leveling pre-Legion, the mob didn't get any tougher. So you won't feel weaker against that second boar. You just feel relatively weaker once you go and find some mobs that are at the same level that you are now. Whereas now, because all the mobs scale as well, the whole world scales around you, then you are going to feel weaker. In fact, you might see a situation where you're, say, level 118, and you had all your mythic and Taurus gear, but you're now starting to replace it with quest gear, and you're in a particular area killing the boars, whatever it happens to be, and then you see some smart ass going around beating the hell out of them really easily. And it's possibly that they're a level 110. They're also in Mythic Argus gear. They're behind you with their leveling. They're only just getting around to it. They're having a much easier time because for them, they're in like super awesome gear. Which is why I, when I was leveling, decided to do the tougher zones first, the ones where you've got the highest density of mobs that I'm going to have to wade through while I had the better gear, and then the ones with more spread out and where I can be more efficient with mob killing, for the last zone. But Ian Hazzikostas did sort of hint that, maybe there's something we need to do about it, even though he acknowledged someone posting that it's a price worth paying. And I agree with that. He did sort of suggest, well, maybe there's something we can do as well. I would personally just leave it. I mean, sure, if someone has a genius idea, then that's fine. My main problem when you go up a level and you feel weaker as a result of it is not a problem with scaling. For me, and I've said this before, the problem there is that when you go up a level, you don't get anything. You used to get a talent point. Obviously, the talent point system has changed now. But you used to get something. There was something that you could do that says, my character has grown in power because I have this thing. Now, obviously, the way talents work, we can't just get a new ability every level. That would be ridiculous. We have a fraction of the number of abilities that we have levels that we need to pursue. And this is, of course, only going to be increased as we go for further expansions. But ultimately, Yes, for me, it's not a downside with mob scaling. It's a downside with the fact that we don't get to pick anything for us. And when it comes to the mob scaling, I think it's absolutely a price worth paying. That we have scaling, but that nonetheless means that we are going to have to take longer to kill certain mobs. Again, a level squish would be nice there, but as Blizzard have already said, technically speaking, that would cause a lot of problems. They said that when they introduced mob scaling, of course, that generated an awful lot of problems. You know, when they did the item level squish very recently, that of course created a lot of problems. They said if we were to do a level squish as well, you wouldn't believe the problems that that would cause. So that was it. Which is another thing. Speaking about item level squishers, someone did talk about the fact that, okay, but we're still getting this massive explosion in item level, because this is the second time in the game that we've had, well, more of a power squish. We didn't get an item level squish the first time. Blizzard have thought that this time round it'll work better if we don't just do a stat squish, but we also do an item level squish. But the question was still asked, but we've still got this massive increase in item level. Ian Hazzikostas was defending this by saying, well, we've sort of worked out by trial and error that in order to incentivize doing more difficult content, roughly 15 item levels between each version. For raids, for example, between LFR, normal, heroic and mythic, we want about 15 item level gap there. That seems to work well in terms of incentivizing us. But, of course, what that means is across the course of an expansion, particularly as Legion went back on track with having several good quality tiers. So you had a number of raids in there, unlike WoD, for example, there are only a couple. You are going to have a much higher item level at the end of the expansion as compared to the beginning. And, of course, this inflation is still always going to be there. And the question was asked, does that mean we're going to need a squish every expansion? To which he replied, not every expansion, but maybe every other expansion. So it sounds like what they've done, thinking of the long term, is prepared the ground, you know, now, so that not next expansion, but the expansion after, which, by the way, whenever they talk about these things, I mean, people keep saying, oh, I don't think there's much left in the World of Warcraft. Like I've been saying recently, there is, and it's clear that they intend there to be. So the expansion after next will probably have another stat and maybe item level squish as well. And maybe what they've done in terms of the architecture of the game is laid the ground so that it'll be much easier to implement that next time round and we won't have so many problems, in which case, great. So those are the sort of things that Ian Hazzikostas was talking about. And again, he expanded on a few of those points in a forum post on the NA forums. Again, there is a link in the description below if you want to read that. What I would take from it is when it comes to mob scaling, I am broadly in favour of the way Blizzard have implemented it. Certainly I'm in favour of the way they've implemented it for like the current zones. And I don't really see that the disadvantages are anything to worry about, because I think the benefits far outweigh those disadvantages. Personally, if they're going to put their mind to any little issues, I would rather they do it to genuine issues. I don't really see that as an issue. It's the nature of mob scaling, and mob scaling is just something that should just become standard. I think if we never had a situation where mobs didn't scale, I don't think people would really see it as a big disadvantage at all. Because when I go back to non-computer role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, things like that, then again, as you leveled up, you know, the Dungeon Master would throw more difficult enemies against you anyway. So we were sort of used to this concept. But you still felt more powerful because you got more powerful weapons and all the rest of it. And I think if anything's missing, that's what's missing from the game. And I would, if I were them, put my attention towards that, rather than trying to come up with anything that might ruin what is a perfectly good system at the moment. But those are my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts are below. As I said, if you want to discuss this or any other topics, then every Tuesday on this channel we have a live Warcraft discussion from 7 PM UK time. Lasts at least 2 hours. Generally I try and stop it around about 2 hours. If you have enjoyed the video, then please click the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, share with others who might also be interested, and until next time, I'll see you later.